Okay, thank you. I'd like to welcome Bill to Ireland. Bill is a sincere advocate for his beliefs. A week ago, I debated an equally sincere Hamza Tsortzis, whose path to Islam was very like Bill's path to Christianity. They were both in school at the time, and they both had an experience of faith after a conversation with a classmate, and they each committed their lives to spreading the word of God and Allah, respectively. Now, both Bill and Hamza know that their gods exist because of faith, and they're both using reason to help to lead people to a personal truth that they both know by faith, and they're both good, sincere people, and at least one of them, if not both, are mistaken. I strongly believe there are no gods, so I'm a strong atheist. I also don't claim to be able to know that there are no gods, so I'm also an agnostic. I'm always happy to say, even on the question of whether there is a God, that I might be mistaken. But at the moment, I am as confident that the Christian God does not exist as Christians are that Thor does not exist. Does God exist is not merely a technical claim about how the universe came to be. It is also a claim about having moral authority to tell people how to live their lives, and that puts a strong onus of proof and a strong responsibility on people making that claim. I want to suggest tonight, as Bill has somewhat alluded to in his last couple of comments, that essentially we're talking today about whether the Christian God exists. Because for any other God, both Bill and I will simply agree that they don't exist. Our only area of difference is whether the Christian God exists. So how do we evaluate what's most likely to be true? Well, I suggest, unlike Bill's last point, I suggest that faith and personal experience are the worst and least reliable ways of identifying what's true. They result in different people coming to different beliefs about the same reality. Applying reason to evidence is the most reliable way because it can more reliably result in different people coming to the same beliefs about the same reality. And when we apply reason to reality, I'm going to suggest tonight that the idea of a God seems implausible, that reality and morality both seem as they would expect them to be if there was no God, and that there is a relentless pattern of natural explanations replacing supernatural explanations. I'm going to start with the idea of the Christian God seeming implausible, obviously to somebody who doesn't already believe in it. That Christians typically believe that their God is a pure mind without a body, perfect and changeless, a first cause beyond time and space, all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-good. Well, here are 20 reasons why that seems implausible. A pure mind without a body is an invented convenience, because we have no evidence that a mind can exist without a body or a brain or a source of energy, and a lot of evidence to suggest that it can't. Even if we explore this invented convenience, a pure mind without a body might be aware of the existence of matter, but it couldn't interact with that matter, because there would be no mechanism for it to do so. If this God is changeless, then it cannot create anything, because it would have to change in order to do so. Even if you believed that it simply willed matter into existence, which is another invented convenience, then that act of will would be a change within that supposedly changeless mind. But if this mind is perfect, then it couldn't change anyway, because it would either become more perfect, which is impossible, or less perfect, in which case it would no longer be perfect. Even if it could change, it would not want to change, because being perfect, it would have no desire to do anything. If you respond that it was changeless, but it changed after it created the universe, or when it created the universe, then it is simply false to say that it is changeless. Or could it change back to being changeless? And how would that change happen? If the God is no longer changeless, or beyond time and space, then it may have ceased to exist sometime in the last 14 billion years. If this God is all perfect and all good, then it would have created a perfect universe. At a minimum, a perfect universe would not contain suffering or evil. If you respond that even a perfect God can only do what is logically possible, then it is logically possible to have a universe without suffering or evil. If you respond that the universe is actually perfect, but we just don't understand how, then why would the God have to intervene in this perfect universe through miracles? The Euthyphro dilemma still remains. Does the God command things to be good for arbitrary reasons? Or does it identify things as being good because they correspond to independent standards of goodness. If you respond that God's nature is to be good, and that gets you off, it doesn't, the dilemma still remains. Is the God's nature good for arbitrary reasons, or is it good because it corresponds to independent standards of goodness? All of the arguments for an all-good God can just as easily be used to support the idea of an all-evil God who gives us free will because it wants us to do evil voluntarily rather than force us to do evil. If this God is all-knowing, then it knows the taste of strawberry yogurt. But if it doesn't have a body or senses, then how can it know the taste of anything? And if you respond to that by saying, well, what it knows is it knows the truth of propositions, then it is not all-knowing, it is less than all-knowing. If this God is all-knowing, then it knows what we're going to do in the future. But if it knows that, then either we don't have free will, or else the God has consciously created free agents that it knows will do evil. If this God cares about humans on planet Earth, then at a minimum it could have given us all the same information and the same moral messages. And finally, let me remind you that all of this is just exploring hypothetically an invented convenience, which is that there can be such a thing as a pure mind without a body, or a brain, or a source of energy. And you have to justify that before you move on to all of the supposed attributes. And you have to justify it in the actual world of reality, not just in the invented universe of discourse of theology. The second set of arguments that I want to make is that reality looks like we would expect with no God. Here are 10 reasons why. Theists believe that this God created the universe out of nothing, but the modern study of physics is based on patterns and not causes, and it only allows us to examine back as far as the Big Bang. We simply don't know what might have happened before that. Our universe, or any number of others, might have begun or might be eternal. Theists believe that this God created the universe with a purpose, but we don't see the universe moving towards any purpose. What we mostly see is impersonal forces pushing and pulling particles around, and mostly moving towards a state of increasing disorder. Theists believe that this God fine-tuned the physical constants of the universe to allow life. But while these constants do allow life, they don't seem to be related to that, or indeed any purpose. And in any case, from a theistic point of view, life has nothing to do with physical constants. It's spiritual. It could exist alongside any set of physical constants, or even without any physical matter at all. The whole point of theism is that our life is not bound to our physical bodies or physical constants, but is spiritual in nature. Indeed, if you believe that this God is a pure, bodiless mind, and if you also believe that matter cannot come from nothing, then the most rational theistic conclusion to come to would be that the God has spawned other pure, bodiless minds, and that matter itself is an illusion. Theists believe that this God has a special relationship with human beings on planet Earth. But we see a universe that is incredibly wasteful for such an imagined purpose. If it exists, this human-focused God has wasted almost all of time and space in its human-focused plan. Our observable universe is 92 billion light years in diameter and expanding. It has over 100 billion galaxies, each of which has 100 billion stars like our sun. We don't know how far our universe extends beyond the observable region. We don't know whether it is spatially finite or infinite, or if other universes exist that exist completely outside of it. Our observable universe is almost 14 billion years old. Life on Earth began about 3.8 billion years ago. Human life began about 200,000 years ago. The Abrahamic God supposedly revealed itself to human beings about 4,000 years ago. That's 4,000 years out of 14 billion years. For context, the astronomer royal Sir Martin Rees once compared the lifespan of our sun to a human being walking across America from New York to California. He said that on that scale, all of recorded human history would be 4 or 5 steps somewhere in the middle of Kansas, which, as Professor Rees put it, is hardly the apex of the journey. Theists believe that this God created human life as more special than other life. But we know that we are just one evolved species among many. There have been 5 billion species on Earth. 99% of them are extinct. Humans are one of the remaining 50 million species that currently share this tiny planet. We cannot live outside of the planet without the aid of technology. On the planet, we can only live on a small part of the planet's surface. The part that we can live on has earthquakes and volcanoes and tsunamis. We can die within seconds of being deprived of oxygen or for any other number of reasons. We can believe things and we can do things that are counterproductive to our survival. And those of us who do the fewest things that are counterproductive to our survival are the ones who survive. We have, however, evolved a capacity to apply reason to evidence. And that enables us to understand more about how the universe operates naturally. We can design models of reality to help us to understand how actual reality might work. And this provides us with fantastically reliable predictions about reality, particularly when contrasted to the utter unreliability of theistic beliefs. And this is enabling us to gradually move beyond earlier beliefs about supernatural agency. Whatever the specific mechanisms might be involved, human life is as we would expect it to look if there was no God, if there was natural evolution. Yet with astounding self-importance and grandiosity, many humans still believe that we, alone on our planet, alone in our galaxy, and alone in the universe, are the only living beings with God-given immortal souls. I want to move on now to the issue of morality. And I'm going to suggest that morality is also as we would expect it to be if there was no God. Again, here are 10 reasons why. Firstly, what do I mean by morality? An outcome is bad, and I believe objectively so, if it harms a sentient being, and an action is objectively wrong if the agent unjustly harms a sentient being. In any given situation, it can be easy or difficult to know what the right or wrong thing to do is. Now, if there was an all-knowing, all-perfect, all-good God that was the source of morality and that cared about human beings on planet Earth, at a minimum you would expect that he would be able to give us all the same moral message. And we would see throughout different parts of the world and different parts of history everybody having the same sense of morality. If there was no God, what we would expect to see is that different sets of people at different times and at different places in the world would be evolving different sets of morality, different codes of morality, and that is indeed what we do see. So in parallel to applying reason to the evidence of reality in order to try to understand what is objectively true about reality, we can also try to apply reason to the evidence of our behaviour to try to understand what is true about morality. And it is simply false to suggest that we need the assistance of a God to do that. There are many approaches to moral philosophy that do not invoke gods. I'm going to give you one plausible model. Morality has evolved in the brains of social animals, including humans, because both cooperation and competition are useful to survival. When parents look after their children, those children are more likely to grow up. When tribes cooperate in looking for food, those tribes are more likely to survive. And so genes for caring for children and genes for cooperating tend to be passed on from generation to generation and become more common. Now we see 3 phases of morality among social animals. The first phase is empathy and compassion. The second phase is cooperation and reciprocity. And the third phase is understanding, fairness and justice. And many non-human animals will exhibit these types of morality. There was an experiment where rats would refuse food if they saw that when they ate the food another rat was electrocuted. said a lot about human morality, setting up an experiment like that. There's another experiment where monkeys were given food if they put a token into a slot. Some monkeys couldn't figure it out. Another monkey would take their token, put it in the slot, and when the food comes out, give the food to the monkey that couldn't figure out the mechanism. But aside from that, humans and some other animals have a greater capacity for more nuanced morality because we have a greater capacity for reason. We can know that something is wrong because we can understand that it causes unjustified harm. So our sentience and our consciousness and our ability to reason give us a special role in sharing our lives with those who we share our lives on this planet, in that our behaviour has consequences for other living beings, but it does not give us a special place in the universe as a whole. Now, I subscribe to a variation of John Rawls' social contract theory of morality. And what that is essentially is how would a perfectly rational set of people design principles of justice for a society if we don't know in advance what position we would hold in that society. We don't know whether we'd be rich or poor, we don't know whether we'd be male or female, we don't know whether we'd be healthy or sick. And that veil of ignorance forces us to be impartial and to develop just, universally just principles. Now, my personal addition to that theory is that we also should not know what species we would be. Because I believe that one of the greatest injustices in our world, morally, is how we treat non-human animals. Every year we kill over 50 billion farmed animals and up to 1 trillion fish, and these sentient beings suffer unjustly for our convenience, and our slaughter of them is an ongoing moral atrocity. In any given circumstance, it's already hard enough to understand and figure out what the right balance is between empathy and compassion and cooperation and reciprocity and fairness and justice. But religion corrupts this already difficult process by adding in imagined, supposedly supernatural commands that are unrelated to the requirements of morality. And so you see verse 24:2 of the Quran saying, flog adulterers 100 times each, and do not let your compassion stop you. Because clearly there were some early Muslims who realised that this punishment was disproportionate and immoral, and so they had to be told, and do not let your compassion stop you. And you get Deuteronomy and 1 Samuel in the Bible, where the Christian God repeatedly commands the Israelites to attack the cities of other tribes and to show them no compassion and to completely destroy them, putting to death man, woman, child and infant, and leaving nothing alive that breathes. And you get otherwise good people like Bill here, who I genuinely respect as a good person, defending this act of slaughter because of his religious belief, on the grounds that it is good because God commanded it, even though it would have been bad if God had not commanded it, including defending the slaughter of infants and children on the basis that they would go straight to heaven. Not only is belief in a God not needed for morality, but belief in a God can actively corrupt our natural morality, even in the mind of an obviously good man like Bill. I'll address Bill's opening arguments in my next contribution. And Bill, I know I've given you a lot to respond to here, and I would like you to respond to as much as you can. But while you're doing so, can you please prioritise responding to these questions? Is it possible that you might be mistaken that the Christian God exists? If so, what evidence would convince you? And I'm happy to say I might be mistaken about my belief on it. How do you justify the supposed existence of a pure mind without a body when there is no evidence that such a thing can exist? And by what mechanism could such a thing create and interact with matter? Is it logically possible to have a universe without suffering or evil? Why is God's nature good? Is it good for arbitrary reasons or because it corresponds to independent standards of goodness? How do you justify as objectively moral the Christian God repeatedly ordering the Israelites to slaughter children and infants of other tribes? And to summarise my overview, is there a God? I don't know. Bill doesn't know, none of us know. What's the most reliable way of finding out? I suggest that faith and personal experience are the least reliable, and that applying evidence to, or reason to evidence is the most reliable. When we apply a reason to evidence, we notice that the idea of a God is implausible. We notice that reality and morality are as we would expect them to be if there was no God. And we also notice that natural explanations are relentlessly replacing supernatural explanations. And while there are still some questions that we still don't understand the answers to, I suggest on the basis of that relentless flow of natural explanations replacing supernatural ones and nothing going in the opposite direction, that it is more reasonable than not, until we get evidence to the contrary, to believe that there is no God. Thank you very much.